Hey guys, it's Anshul. Welcome back to Supercharged. Do you ever notice that vaccines go away and come back like every 2 years? Just like my ex. Come back, Stacy, I miss you! Every 2 years we see this popping up again and again in popular culture, like with all these memes coming out of nowhere. People even talk about it on TV.
There's a small but still sizable group of people who are choosing not to vaccinate their children.
Baseless claims about a link between vaccines and developmental disorders have fueled the so-called anti-vaxxer movement for years now.
The modern anti-vaxxer movement is gaining momentum, despite studies finding that vaccines are not linked to autism.
Most recently, vaccines have started to pop up again in niche online communities. Adam Schiff, a US politician, has been talking about it a lot and encouraging big companies to limit access to anti-vax content. Debunking anti-vax news stories gets so much viewership online. It's why companies like Vox and BuzzFeed post articles like these. Even the World Health Organization has cited the anti-vaccine movement as one of the top 10 health crises of 2019. But why won't it just die? Like the kids. Can I get a stupidity vaccine? For whatever reason, the argument around vaccines feels like every other social debate that we've had. They go away, they come back, but they never really feel solved. Now look, this isn't a video examining the pros and cons of vaccinating your kids. Spoiler alert, I'm vaccinated and I'm pro-vaccine. But that's mainly because I love needles. This video is more about analyzing why social debates like gun control or climate change or even vaccines never really feel complete. The vaccination versus anti-vaccination debate isn't so much about two conflicting ideologies as much as a normal cycle of scientific progress. We're going to examine this through the history of vaccinations and through the lens of the Kuhn cycle of scientific revolutions and where that leads us. Let's jump right into it. Most people think that vaccines started with this research paper. Andrew Wakefield, a doctor at the time but since revoked, claimed that there was a connection between autism and vaccines in this paper right here. And it did at some level, but really for the next 10 years after he published that paper, nobody but scientists cared. It was only really debated in scholarly circles, and it was thoroughly debunked. The media had sort of picked it up, but the headlines didn't really allude to much more than that. Really, this all started as it always does in pop culture. Celebrity endorsements. Jenny McCarthy, a former Playboy model, in a now infamous interview with Larry King Live in 2008, sparked what we consider the modern healthcare crisis.
3, the vaccine schedule was 10 vaccines given. Now, today, there are 36. And a lot of people don't know that, 36 shots.
There's 36 inoculations.
Yes.
And
yes.
You're saying they are the cause?
Glad you brought that up. No, I do not believe that vaccines are the sole cause for autism. I do believe they are a trigger.
After this interview, things started to spike up. As you can see with the Google Trends of keyword searches at the time, interest around the anti-vaccine movement and parental choice started to pick up. Before 2008, there wasn't a lot of traction, but slide that thing over and you can see that the trends are really starting to pick up in the most recent era. The modern anti-vax movement is complex and has a ton of different tribes, but in reality, it's not as big as it seems. Yes, you see peaks every couple of years and you see the inflammatory articles, but the reality is, most people get their children vaccinated. Even with the Google Trends of vaccination versus anti-vaccination, though they might look scary, when combined together, anti-vaccination doesn't even appear on the map. Even in recent years, Jenny McCarthy's foundation has rebranded from anti-vax to anti-autism. Knowing all this history now, let's talk about the Kuhn cycle. The Kuhn cycle was proposed by Thomas Kuhn, written in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. In this book, Thomas Kuhn detailed how we normally see scientific advancement as one person piling on top of the other, but in reality, that's just not true. What Kuhn proposed is that scientific advancement is actually a revolution of paradigm shifts and changes in how we talk about science itself, and why that's so important to our social discourse. Now, let's look at the cycle and see how it applies to vaccines. Up here, we've got pre-science. Pre-science is when people have started to focus on the problem, but they don't really know how to categorize it yet. In our case, plagues like the Black Death and malaria started raising legitimate concerns about how to best protect ourselves from these kind of viruses. The questions that are often asked at this stage of the scientific revolution are much more dire and immediate. Am I going to die? Is my pet rat going to kill me? When is BuzzFeed coming out with their own line of romp hymns? Next up is normal science. In normal science, we end up finding a way, or a model, that solves a lot of the anomalies or questions that we had before. For vaccines, this was actually the creation of the first smallpox vaccine. Edward Jenner managed to inoculate a young boy from smallpox by injecting him with a much milder version of the virus, cowpox. Finally, we had something legitimate that actually worked and seemed to stave away the illness. This answered one of the biggest questions that we had. Is it possible to protect yourself from diseases earlier? In this state, we often find ourselves asking questions about how to apply this new technology to new things. It's where ML, AI, AR, VR, and all the other two-letter buzzwords are right now. Next up, we get to model drift and model crisis. Model drift is when new questions start coming up that the old model doesn't really have much of an answer to. For Edward Jenner, it was, well, if we're injecting ourselves with another virus in order to stop the other virus, how is that any better? Wait, sir, you're injecting me with another virus, so I don't get the other one? Yeah, should be safe. I think. Most likely. Well, can you not? This leads us into model crisis, where enough anomalies or holes appear in the original model that new questions start to be raised. The reason this is called a crisis is because decisions are no longer made rationally, and guesswork and intuition seem to take center stage. This is where vaccines are at right now. Why the questions that are being asked right now are being asked. You see things like
mandating vaccines for education, that is coercion.
Or like,
doesn't give them the right to mandate vaccines. We have a right on this planet to choose for our own bodies what we take in.
Or even,
autism has become an epidemic. 2 years old, 2.5 years old, a beautiful child, went to have the vaccine and came back and a week later got a tremendous fever, got very, very sick, now is autistic.
while seemingly silly, these are legitimate questions that our scientific progress hasn't been able to understand yet, or fully answer, and why we haven't been able to move on to the next step. Often, the questions you'll find that are being asked in the model crisis stage are individual versus group think. What does the success of an individual look like versus the success of a group? After that, you have the model revolution. Model revolution is when there's a paradigm shift in how we see our current science. A new model comes out that answers all of our questions. Now, the term paradigm shift is overused. What it really means is a new model whose scientific discoveries are so vastly different from the original that the rules have changed. Now, vaccines haven't been able to get here because we legitimately don't have the technology to do so. Now, that might sound surprising, but hear me out before you hit that dislike button. We still don't understand enough biologically about how viruses mutate. Because of this, we can't give a comprehensive vaccine. Our vaccines have to be updated every few years. It's the reason why you have to keep getting your flu shot every year because of the various mutations that exist. It's the reason why you need such a rigorous schedule to protect yourself against so many other viruses because of their mutations and their changes in their genetic code. The questions asked in this part of the cycle may seem silly and illogical, but generally all focus around the question of how do we get more people to use this and where do we go from here? Finally, we get to a paradigm shift and repeat the entire cycle. Here, the field transitions to a new understanding and uses this previous scientific discovery to build greater and even better technology. The questions that we often ask ourselves here is, what's next? Now that we understand that, why do vaccines just keep popping up? Vaccines as a science have gone around the cycle quite a few times, but right now we're stuck in model crisis. And as we discussed earlier, our biological understanding of viruses is what's stopping us from moving on to the next model revolution. Because of this, we keep having these crazy conversations about the amount of shots we get or the safety or even the need for vaccines, when clearly they've solved a legitimate problem. Each side doesn't have a response to the other and just keeps missing the point. If you want to see a great video of this, check out Jubilee's video. They take anti-vaxxers and vaxxers and put them in the same room and have them talk it out. I'll leave that up here and somewhere in the description. In conclusion, the vaccine versus anti-vaccine movement might sound like a crazy, inarguable debate, but in reality, it mirrors the natural progression of scientific progress in our society. While frustrating and seemingly incomprehensible, this is how science grows and progresses. In the future, when trying to understand any issue in the media around technology, try to think of the Kuhn cycle and think about where you are in that cycle. What questions are being asked and by who? And hopefully, that'll provide some context into understanding the issue at large. That's all I have for you guys today. If you like that kind of content, make sure to hit the subscribe button and drop a like on this video. If you want to tell me more about what you think about vaccines, comment down below. Until the next one, have a supercharged day. Why do I do this? Oh my god, why do I do this? That actually fucking hurt.